I have waited many days to make this video and to give my impressions on this, the most important game of the moment. That game, of course, being The Last of Us Part 2. This is a game that's been highly looked forward to by the vast majority of people in the gaming industry, it seems, and the gaming public. It's a game that I honestly wasn't that hyped for a long time, mainly because while I thought The Last of Us 1 was a fantastic game, and the story particularly was one of the best I had seen in a game in a long time, something didn't really hit me right. I felt the game was a little overrated. Not bad, just was really not the game that I thought was the best game of its era or even all time. And so when Last of Us 2 was announced, I didn't really get that excited for it. I was like, okay, that's great. I thought the first game ended perfectly. Do we need a second game? Probably not. But of course, they're going to make a sequel. And I had that opinion for a long time. I just wasn't really excited for it. And then, strangely enough, after the game started getting delayed for many reasons, and the game was being pushed away from other big name games like Final Fantasy VII Remake, I became more interested in wanting to play it. And about 2 weeks ago, I went back and played The Last of Us Remastered for the very first time because I had only played on the PS3. I'd never played the PS4 version, and I was once again shown just how important that game was to me, how great that story was, how emotionally attached I was to the characters, Ellie and Joel, particularly the main characters of the story, but not just them, all the characters in the entire game. And I was also really impressed by the stealth mechanics in the game. That was something I always loved when I first played it. That stealth actually meant something. That this world was so dangerous that if you didn't actually take your time and think about the way you moved, you're going to be dead. So as I finished that game, I'm like, well, you know what? Last of Us 2, it looks like it's going to be a good game. The reviews were coming in. We were seeing a lot of 10 out of 10s, a lot of not perfect scores, but the highest scores imaginable. A lot of people saying it's a masterpiece almost universally, except for a number of people that weren't giving review number scores. And that started to worry me because they were saying things like there were issues with the story and there were issues with the gameplay. Now, we should also mention that there was a huge leak of information for this game many weeks ago. We all know this, and this led to a large number of people complaining about many aspects of the game that no one really knew for sure if it was true or not because we hadn't played the game yet. And I avoided all those. In fact, I had someone warn me not to play the game because of the spoilers. They said, Matt, go look at the spoilers. And I'm like, I am not looking at the spoilers. I'm going to play this game on my own and I'm going to see what it's like. And I went in without looking at the spoilers, without looking at the complaints, particularly some of the ridiculous complaints regarding the inclusion of certain types of characters and certain types of people in the game, because that stuff had no matter to me whatsoever. I wanted to go in blind into the game and see it for myself and see if I can enjoy it. And my impressions that I had have been one of the hardest to really put to words, because this game should have been easily, in my opinion, one of the best games of the year. When I started playing this game, I'm going to start first with the actual gameplay discussion, then we'll go into the spoilers and the story talk. This game, once again, just like the original, was a fantastic playing game. Once again, putting you into this world of a post-apocalyptic world where a zombie-like virus has happened and has fractured the entire world of humanity into factions of fighting people, also dealing with these zombified creatures and trying to survive. And the gameplay, of course, just like in the first game, involves a lot of stealth, a lot of killing, and a lot of exploration of worlds. Particularly in this game, it takes place in Seattle. And the thing that really stood out for me, especially in the first opening hours of the game, was just how well done every small aspect of the game was. The world that they created, the world of, first of all, it was Jackson, Wyoming, the original setting of at the beginning of the game, the home of Ellie and Joel from the end of the game of Last of Us 1, down to Seattle, and down to later on areas of the world that they explore, is just incredibly detailed. This is some of the best graphics you'll ever see on the PlayStation 4. I would say it's absolutely the best graphics on PlayStation 4. It's almost next gen quality. And the people that have been talking about it have said, oh, this is the best game running on PlayStation 4 Pro. I've been playing it on my launch PS4. It's ran amazing. There have been some bugs, but for the most part, it just looks fantastic. So graphics are there. The sound and music design is something that I really like. I like how in The Last of Us, music is used only in extremely tense moments to make you understand that this is an intense moment and you really need to focus on the situation. Usually in a lot of the story scenes, there's no music. There is no sound. It's just the people talking and the actual environment in the world. And I like that because too much music can kind of affect that story and affect that a sense of giving a real like perspective on the story itself. I think that that was fantastic and I loved it. I loved that part of the game. I loved that in the first game too. So again, that was great. The acting in this game, really well done. I really think that the actors, I think it was Ashley Johnson, I believe is her name, that plays Ellie, nailed it out of the park. Troy Baker, I think, has played Joel. He nailed it out of the park. Everyone in this game, for the most part, did very well in the acting. They had no trouble with that. That was really well done. But I do want to get back to that later. Again, the gameplay itself, the stealth gameplay, the shooting, the firing was... it's hard to say fun because this is not a fun game. This is a game where you're going through a very hellish situation, and when we get into the story, we'll explain more why it's not fun. But it's more of an interactive experience, and for that, it works really well. It's an extremely violent game. Extremely violent. One of the most violent games you'll see outside of like the cartoonish violence that's really realistic in Mortal Kombat, but for like an actual game that's not like that. The deaths particularly are very, very violent, very, very difficult to watch for some people, and the entire atmosphere is of a dark nature, so much darker than the original game, where the original game there was at least some hope there, but this game is extremely dark, which we'll get to more in a minute. But in terms of the actual gameplay, again, the stealth is there. It's really well handled. You really have to keep an eye on the world and keep an eye on your enemies to make sure that you don't make a mistake, because if you make a mistake, it is over for you. You're going to have to redo the whole level. I love the fact that they did some things to make it more realistic. For instance, if you're hit by something, or by a bullet, or by some sort of object, you'll fall backwards. Sometimes you'll fall back on your back, and you have to stay in your back for a second, and you can shoot them from your back, which was a really nice little detail there. They really went out of their way to have lots of detail in this game and to try to make it as realistic as possible. And of course, that comes from a lot of time and development, probably a lot of the crunch time, which a lot of people don't like. So there's some negativities about that. But for in terms of the gameplay, it was very well done. It's not the greatest gameplay in the world, but it is exciting. So there you go. Graphics are good. Gameplay is good. The sound is good. The music is good. The acting is good. But why do I feel so conflicted? And this is where this review of this title, of this game, is one of the hardest things I've ever had to review, because it is a narrative-driven game. And this game has one of the most disappointing, unbelievably terrible stories I have ever played in a video game. I play tons of bad games. I love playing bad games. For example, the so-called Kuso games in Japan. I love playing all those types of games. I love a game with a terrible story. I love a game that's ridiculous. I love a game that's, you know, that just goes bonkers with it. Just for example, I picked this up recently, The Matrix Path of Neo. Not a great game in terms of like, oh, it's a masterpiece. It's kind of wacky and weird, but it's fun because you know what? They know it's going to be weird and wacky. This game, however, is a narrative-driven game that needs to focus on its story. Its story is its most important part. And so we all know in The Last of Us 1, the story was an absolute important thing. Joel, the main character, loses his daughter at the beginning of the outbreak in a horrific beginning scene. We then go fast forward 20 years later. Joel is a broken man, broken from the loss of his daughter, from the loss of his family, from dealing with 20 years of this horrible plague, and is then thrust into having to deliver a girl from one part of the country to another who has been bitten and has this virus, but somehow did not turn into one of these zombified creatures. She had a cure. And at first, it's really difficult for him because he doesn't want anything to do with this girl, doesn't really care for her. It's just, another job. But over the time of the game, he becomes very attached to her, and she becomes his new daughter. And it comes to a head with the end of The Last of Us 1, where he has to make a very difficult decision when he finally delivers Ellie to the Fireflies. In the first game, the Fireflies were, of course, the group that was like fighting against the government, sort of like a rebellion type group that was supposed to help Ellie and help find a cure. Well, it turns out that, of course, they have to kill her, apparently, because that's the only way they're going to be able to get the information, get the things out of her head to be able to possibly create a cure, and that would kill Ellie. Well, Joel doesn't want to do that, obviously, and he goes bonkers, and he rampages through the final level of the hospital to save Ellie, killing anyone he can, fulfilling that wonderful, interesting little, I guess you could say, not pun or whatever, it's like saying from Star Trek, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one. The opposite from Star Trek 4, the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many. So Joel prevented, possibly, humanity losing their, prevented them from having their cure. Last of Us 2 is a much different story. Where Last of Us 1 had hope with Ellie, and hope with Joel being able to overcome his things, and hope of going to Jackson to live with a good world, hope that maybe there could be a cure. Last of Us 2 is nothing more than a very terribly written revenge story. And so at this point, I'm going to go into spoilers. So if you haven't played the game, you may want to go ahead and skip the rest of the next 10 minutes or so, because I'm just going to go through it. The game is basically a revenge story. In the first game, Joel, he shoots and kills the surgeon who was about to perform the surgery on Ellie that would kill her. It turns out that that surgeon had a daughter. Her name was Abby. And it turns out in this game, Last of Us 2 actually has two protagonists, Ellie and Abby. And interesting enough, we were introduced to Abby a few years ago in a trailer that didn't really give much information, just showed Abby being about to be killed and saved by a bunch of children, which they do show in this game, and that you actually get to see that story segment. So we kind of had an idea that was going to come. Well, Abby has been searching for Joel for years because she wants revenge, and she heads on up to Jackson, and somehow, through fate, he runs into her because she's found herself being attacked by these creatures, and he and his brother save her, and they follow her into their hideout, this like hideout of Abby and her friends, former Fireflies. Now they're looking for Joel, and they don't know where he is. They just know he's in Jackson. and they haven't found a way to get inside yet. And one of the weird things about the story that everyone's complaining about, I didn't really mind this part, but a lot of people were complaining, was that, oh, Joel and it was Tommy. Tommy was saying they immediately introduced themselves like, "Yeah, we're from Jackson. My name's Joel. My name's Tommy." Yes, and they said that would be something that he wouldn't do. Something Joel wouldn't do because you look at the first game, he wouldn't tell the truth all the time. He would be very hesitant to say anything. I will say this: it didn't really bug me that much that that happened, because I would think that after 4 years in this safe area, that maybe a little bit of that feeling of nervousness outside probably kind of like slipped aside, and maybe the little bit of that southern or western hospitality kind of kicked in there, because remember, he's from Texas, and like, howdy, I'm Joel. Well, that leads to one of the most controversial scenes. Didn't really bug me as much as it bugged a lot of people, but Abby kills Joel in a very brutal and very violent way. And actually, Ellie tries to find Joel, finds Joel as she walks in on the room, and she's beaten down, and she has to watch Abby finish the job of brutally beating up and killing Joel with a golf club. Abby is absolutely just presented in a horrifically terrible way, just an absolute villain in the complete 100% way you could ever possibly imagine. From this one scene alone, there is no way you could feel any sort of feeling of positivity or redemption or anything that you could feel for her. She is just the epitome of pure evil in the eyes of Ellie. And so Ellie goes on a journey to try to find her. They've remembered that on their shirts there was a marking for the Washington Liberation Front. So they're thinking, okay, she's in Seattle. Okay, I'm going to go to Seattle. Her girlfriend comes with her, which was another thing people were complaining about. Oh, there is some lesbian angle. That's not even a problem. That, in fact, it's a great thing about this story. I thought they handled that very well. The relationship between those two girls were very, very well done. In fact, I liked it. But Ellie goes to Seattle, and actually Tommy goes ahead of her. Tommy was going to go with her, but he decides to go on, and now she's not only chasing after Abby, she's chasing after Tommy. And so for the next 10 hours, you are dealing with a story of Ellie's revenge. And every encounter, every action is this action of anger and frustration and just hate-filled revenge. She lost the most important person in her life, and she wants to get back at the people who killed him. It doesn't matter why they killed him. They don't really even say why in the beginning, so we don't know. It's just, we must get back. We must get back at him. Now, we do also see some flashbacks which tries to showcase some interesting things where apparently Ellie finds out, oh yeah, actually Joel lied at the end of the game about why they didn't do the operation on her. And finally Joel tells the truth, and Ellie actually break away from him. Because she's angry that he lied to her about that and made her life meaningless in her eyes, because she could have been the cure for humanity, and thus her life would have had meaning, whereas now she feels it doesn't have meaning, even though it does have meaning for Joel, and it does have meaning for everyone else she's met. It's one of those things where I'm kind of like, I kind of understand how you feel, but I also kind of feel like they're kind of pushing too many buttons here. It seems like it's the same old, oh, you lied to me, so I can't stand you anymore storyline. And so we get through all these things where Ellie is doing all these horrible things. She's just killing people left and right. And we finally get to a point about 10 hours in the game. And at this point, I've been like really enjoying what I'm playing. The story is very interesting. And all of a sudden, as pretty much everyone has been taken care of, one person left is Abby, and they realize that Ellie realizes after she killed one of the people who she finds out was pregnant afterwards, which makes her disgusted. Which, interesting enough, a lot of people are complaining about. It's like, oh, she killed these people, but she didn't mind killing the pregnant woman. So what's the deal there? Kind of felt the same way. It's like, yeah, everyone's dead, 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 dead. Oh God, pregnant woman. Oh God, I'm feeling so horrible. I don't know how I feel about that. There's part of me that's like, yes, I completely understand, because she's killing someone that had, you know, a child inside, you know, that had nothing to do with this. But she's also has no problem killing hundreds of people that had nothing to do with this as well, that just happen to be part of the same group. Well, Tommy stops her after that and says, look, it's done. We've done all the things we can do. Abby can go. And you know, yes, we didn't get the revenge, but it's not worth it. Let's go home. And so they go back to their hideout, which is a theater. And what happens next, and what happens over the next 15 hours, is what completely just changed me in this game. Abby shows up, and she's basically holding them at gunpoint and saying, you killed all my friends, and you're going to pay for this. And then the game decides you must play as Abby. And you find out all this thing about Abby. You find out that Abby is the daughter of the doctor, as I said before, that performed the surgery. You find out as you're playing through Abby's story, you interact with every person that you've killed in the game. In a terrible attempt at trying to give you a feeling of, oh, these people were real people. These people were innocent. These people were just human beings living their lives, and you just killed them out of revenge. You're a horrible person. And yet, we don't see that same feeling towards the Abby part of the story. Abby doesn't do anything in her story that makes you feel like, oh, I am so much better here, or I'm so much right. No, in fact, the Abby story is so cliched, filled with so many cliches of a revenge story, where they try to tell you, oh, revenge is wrong because this is what happens, and it causes people to have more anger, that it really frustrated me as I was playing this game. I was like literally feeling pain trying to continue to keep going on this story, because I couldn't care at all for Abby. I didn't care at all for any of the people there, because none of the people meant anything. They were never given any real time to mean anything, either in the original part where Ellie is killing them, or even in large part where Abby's taking part with them. Sure, some of the characters had a little more role in it. I mean, we even had a sex scene, although not in the Japanese version. That one was cut out. Excuse me there. But nothing really stood out. And as I was playing through it, even the things that were kind of interesting just went by really quickly. There's this whole thing about a third faction in the game that's called the Scars, which is sort of this like cult like following in Seattle that's fighting with the Washington Liberation Front. And there's going to be a battle between the two as the WLF is going to attack them. And you meet these two characters that are very, very interesting, but one of them dies almost like within like 2 hours of meeting them. The other one becomes your partner. Very interesting character, actually, and was a character that's actually trans, and it was interesting to see that character in the game. And that character was one of my favorite characters in it. He was a very, very good character, and I really wanted to see more, and looks like we will see more in the future. But as I'm playing through this game, as I said, I just couldn't stand it. And finally, we get to the end of the Abby part, and you play as Abby having to beat the living heck out of Ellie. You don't want to do this as the character. Your entire emotion is to get revenge for Ellie, but you're forced to play as Abby trying to kill Ellie. And for the last 10 hours, they're trying to make you feel like, oh, you feel like you've learned something and revenge is bad. This is stuff we learn when we're babies, when we're young children, before we even go to kindergarten, that revenge is bad. As they say in Star Trek again, revenge is a dish best served cold, and cold dishes aren't good, and revenge isn't good. There's nothing in this story that's new or unique or interesting. And every time Ellie wins, it just makes you worse and worse and worse. And This game also, it's so poorly paced. The story is so poorly paced that the fact that they do this, make you play one side and then play another side, you would think, okay, well, that would end it. This is where the common complaint about Return of the King, which is a stupid complaint, that it has too many endings. Well, it has many endings because it's the third part of a trilogy of an 11-hour film. It has to finish off a little bit of those stories. This game, on the other hand, has way too many endings. We finished that part. Ellie goes back home with her girlfriend who is pregnant. She has her baby. They're living a life on a farm. Everything's good, but she's having post-traumatic stress syndrome, and she's like, I gotta get more revenge. I got more revenge, and so I'm gonna leave for my revenge, and I'm gonna leave my family. And I was like, why? You just spent this whole time saying revenge is bad, but you can do it. You're just gonna keep going. So it just extends the story more. And then you have the Abby part where she's decided to leave Seattle, to leave all that frustration because she's tired of dealing with all that, and she goes to California, where she's told there's a group of Fireflies regrouping, and she's going to join back up with the Fireflies. Well, it turns out it was just a ploy. There's some like slave group that's here. They don't really explain it very well. That just comes and kicks their ass and excuse me, and then takes them away. And then Ellie comes to California, finds them, gets almost kidnapped by that group, and then somehow is able to escape because she's able to do this. And then she goes and finds the slave group. She frees these slaves, and then goes find Abby, and they have this just gigantic fight on a beach where they're fighting to death. Abby's like, I'm going to get my revenge finally. And she's fighting like with so much effort and so much anger, and to the point where even she gets 2 of her fingers bitten off by Abby, and she doesn't care. She just keeps going, and it's like, this is going to be it. And then she doesn't kill Abby because of a flash of Joel. Joel's memory flashes in her mind, and then she's like, no, go. And Abby wins again. And Ellie goes back home. Home is completely empty. All of her family is left. And she can't even play the guitar anymore. As she tries to play the thing she learned from Joel, she can't play it. She walks off. Game over. And I sat there and I felt like, what was I playing? Because the story was so uneven, and the story was so cliched, and the story was so bad, and I just like, oh my god, like, I've never been more disappointed in a game in years. It was so long, too. That's another thing I have to say. The first Last of Us was 15 hours. It felt really good. The second game is 25 hours, and especially because you have to play as Abby, a character you don't want to play, and you just keep having to push on and on and on and on, and it's just painful. You don't want to play it anymore. You don't want to go through that stress. It's just terrible. And I just was... The final 7 hours, I literally just sat down and I said, look, I'm going to finish this game tonight because I can't take it anymore. And I'm not going to not finish this game. I'm just going to get through it. And I absolutely just went bonkers at the end. I'm like, this is the end? This is the story you told? Okay, revenge is bad. I know that. No one learned anything. What did Abby learn? Nothing. She got everything she wanted. Yeah, she lost her friend. She's still living. She's still got a life to go. Ellie lost everything. And why? Because someone else was pissed off at her. I don't know. This story has so been done a million times. It's nothing special. It never tugged at my heart. And the characters I cared for are the ones that got hurt the most. And the characters that I loved and the characters that I was rooting for, the characters I was hoping for, were completely just destroyed in front of my eyes. And here's the thing. I have no problem with that. I like dark stories. I like stories when the good guys lose. I like stories when things like this happen usually. But in this one, it was frustrating. It was so frustrating because you were acting out the actions, and you don't want to act out those actions. I don't know what to say. And this game is definitely not a masterpiece. Anyone that's saying this is a masterpiece is out of their mind. People that were quoting, there was one guy that said all of their games are like John Wick. Well, this is like Schindler's List. I understand completely the comparison. And I think the controversy about the comparison was ridiculous. This is nowhere on the level of a Schindler's List type of quality of drama. Not even close. This was like terrible B-rated movie revenge story stuff you would see on a Cinemax movie. It was bad. It wasn't good, and it really ruined the franchise for me. And I can't believe it. And like, to see so many people praise this game so high really frustrates me. And what also frustrates me is that there's so many people that are like review bombing this game that never played it. And like, I understand if you don't like this game, that's fine, but don't review it if you didn't play it. I don't care if you hate the situation, refuse to play for that. Don't review it for that. But there's a lot of people out there that I trust, and some big name journalist sites too, they're not giving number reviews, that are actually talking about this game, and they're saying, you know what, it's not that good. The story's not that good. Game's good, not the story. So, yeah. So what do I think about this game overall? I think that The Last of Us Part 2 is an incredibly disappointing sequel to a fantastic original game. I think that in terms of pure gameplay and its set pieces and its world, it is a great game. But because it is a narrative-driven game and that story is so important, it drags it down. Drags it down so much that it is almost unbelievable that the game fell as it did. This could have been one of the great highlights of this generation. And I felt at the beginning of the game that it was. And I felt that the story, the way it was going, seemed like it was going to go that way. But when it just turned into the usual, revenge is bad, it just didn't work for me. So I don't believe in review scores, but I will say this. I am not disappointed that I played the game. I am glad I played the game, but I'm absolutely disappointed in the result of it. This is easily my biggest disappointment so far in 2020. I don't know if there will be another game that even comes close to being this level of disappointment in 2020. Even with my limited feeling of excitement for this game going on before, I still was shocked by how much I did not like this game. This game's story really hurt me, and it was so hard to get through. And the funny thing is this, it's a game that has a not very difficult platinum trophy. I like to go back and play games for those. I won't be going back to this game for that. So I think that, a lot of people like this game, and I'm happy for you. I wish it was the same for me, but it is easily one of the most disappointing games I have ever played. And I really hope that if there is a Last of Us 3, that when they go and write the story, that they do something that makes this whole thing much better. And they do something much better than this, because this was just absolutely bonkers. It just made no sense to me sometimes, and just was so uneven, terribly paced, overly long, bad characters, annoying situations. I just couldn't stand it at all. So it's hard for me to say this is a game I would recommend to everyone, but I do think that most people are going to play it anyway, so it doesn't really matter. It would be very interesting to see how we view this game a year from now. A lot of these games that get 10 out of 10s, 100s out of 100s, get revisited later on, and some people still love them, and some people end up hating them later on, saying, well, we really screwed that one up. But we shall see. But for me, Yes, big disappointment. I don't know if I will ever play Last of Us 3, um, but I hope that Naughty Dog can come back and make something better again, like they did with their past games. But I feel that this game was not the level that I expected of them. It almost was up to a point, and I was feeling great up to a point. But when everything switched on the dime, is when I lost it, and yeah, I feel bad about that. And I shouldn't, because it's not nothing to feel bad about. It's just a game. Anyway, those are my impressions of The Last of Us Part 2. A lot of people have the same impressions, so I'm basically probably just parroting a lot of other people's complaints, but they are the same complaints I had. And again, I think all the people who are complaining about the things that really didn't matter, and about things that, like, culture-wise they have problems with, those people, I just can't stand those arguments. None of that stuff was a problem in the game, and in fact, all those things were great things that were additions. They were great additions. Diversity in the game, and diversity in the characters, and diversity in the story was actually something that was great in the game. And you know what? The Abby being a muscular woman, who cares? Like, really, who cares? Why was that such a big deal? I don't understand why people complained about that. That was not a problem. But what a problem was, the story was very uninteresting after a point, and it was very difficult to play through, and it just really was angering me toward the end. But yeah, hopefully next game I play will be much better. So anyway, if you still stick around for this, I hope you enjoyed my take on it. Probably not the most detailed take, because I'm still having a difficult time dealing with it. Really, I've been trying to make this video for days, and I've been unable to. But if you like what you like what you see, I should say, please take a look at the other videos. I hope to have some more up in the next few days, more about games, and hopefully we'll also be doing a podcast soon, the Ramble Gaming Podcast, with my friends here, that I've been doing in the past. We've had a little bit of a break, about a month break, but we're hoping to get back together soon, and probably we'll be talking about this game, and I'm sure that the opinions on that will be very variety based, or very varied, I should say. Anyway, until next time, take care, enjoy yourself, and I hope that no matter how you feel about The Last of Us 2, you still enjoy gaming as much as I do, because hey, even when it's a bad game, or even when it's a disappointing game, which this is. This is not really a bad game. It's just a very disappointing game. It's still better than a lot of things. So anyway, take care.